Hi, everybody. It's Nancy with For Your K9.
And Joanne with For Better First.
And Lisa with Canine Defined.
All right, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is sensitive uh, to many people and the dog owners. We're talking today about your dog's weight. And we, as instructors, deal with a variety of issues with dogs' weight, and being able to tell folks about about their dog's weight, and and especially in our society in and of itself is also we're also overweight people as well, and so it's not surprising that our dogs and cats follow suit. So one of the reasons we wanted to kind of bring this topic up is a lot of us do dog sports, and we have people coming through our doors that want to do dog sports too with their dogs, right? The problem is it's difficult when somebody wants to do you have an owner that wants to do something with their dogs, but when you look at the dog is physically not going to be able to do that because they're overweight or what have you. So, and then we as instructors have to be the ones to tell them. And I'm going to be honest with you, people get pretty upset about it. I have been verbally accosted about because I told them that their dog could lose to and I'm very sensitive to it. Um, I have been verbally accosted about meat, saying that their dog needs to maybe lose a couple of pounds. Um, right, and there's different reasons why. And my dog, we struggle with our dogs too. Sometimes depending on what's going on in our lives or whatever, where they might be maybe add more weight. And the other thing we see too is those of us that have puppies, we can, a puppy, you can feed them a little more because they're using it to grow, but there is a point where they stop growing, and unfortunately we keep feeding the same amount of food. And it doesn't, like when we were teenagers, we were able to eat vast quantities of a lot of food, and now we could never eat that again. Or if we ate it, it's not gonna be pretty on the other side of that. So dogs are the same. Wouldn't you agree, Lisa?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so like when I work with dogs, I'm sure you've heard that the same thing, like, well, the bag said,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, no. Like, the bag said I could have so many calories, so many chips to have so many calories. You know what I mean? And then you're like, that's not okay. Like, before he came on, because I'm a little stressed, I had like some Nutter Butters, and I'm like, okay, Nutter Butters, water, they counteract, whatever. It's not the same, right? And so like with dogs, like I think too, it's like cute cookies. You're adorable. Have a cookie, right? And I'll tell you, like, right now, and then you have other issues. So my 7.5-month-old Papillon, he's going through a little thing where he's like, I'm famished, I'm not. I'm famished, I'm not. I don't want to eat. So he skips meals. And I don't feel bad because I'm like, well, you'll be hungry later. You'll eat your entire meal. He gets about like 2.5 ounces of raw, because I feed raw twice a day. And this morning he didn't want to eat it. He maybe ate 0.7 ounces. I'm like, okay, well, then you can have some more. He's like, no, I'm not that hungry. And I'm trying to sort whether or not it's a food issue where he doesn't like it because he maybe doesn't like the raw. But at the same time, I feel, and I know you have the body score coming up, but like I feel his ribs feel kind of good where you can gently press in and feel them. His activity level is good. His poop response is good. Like all those things, like, are stuff we'll get into, but I assess the entire situation. But today I dealt with a dog, and the lady knew she was over. She's like, he's overweight. I'm like, and I don't ever assume I can ever touch a dog, because that's pretty invasive. So I ended up, saying, how do you feel? Blah, blah, blah. And she's like, well, he has to lose some weight. And it was like contributory to some of the behavioral issues he was having. And I think that's the other thing that's really important to understand. Like,
Yeah.
They're not doing it because they don't want to. It's because, like, I'm fat and I can't run. Like, that's me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm fat and I can't run. There you go. Life's hard. There you go. So adjust something and go from there. I wish somebody was as diligent about my food as I was about my dogs.
Right.
So,
Right. Well, no, and you bring up a great point, because it's like, everything, like training doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? It's
Mhm.
like there's a lot of things that contribute to a training lesson or a training situation. How the dog feels. Does the stomach hurt? Is it overweight? And that'll also depend on how long can the dog work for you. If they're overweight, for me, if I had to walk, well, I walk a lot anyway, but let's say if I had to walk, I don't know, twice what I would normally walk. Let's see, I average 15,000 steps a day. So let's say I wanted to do 25,000 steps a day. Um, I might be kind of tired there, right? After doing that, because I'm not used to it, and physically I'm overweight. So it's like, it's going to be a little harder on my body. And that's the other thing. And this is a topic near and dear, because I'm still struggling with my weight. I want to get stronger. So I started doing weights, and it's like, at my age now, it's a lot tougher than it was when I was, 20s, 30s, right? And so for some of the dogs, as they get older, keeping that muscle mass up and stuff is really important. But if you want to do sports or want to do activities with the dog, it's so important that you maintain a good weight. And I'm going to tell you, sometimes it's gotten away from me. My lab has a tendency to be a little chubby. She likes food, and for her, it's a lot more lack of exercise, because sometimes I don't have time. But usually, if I swim her regularly and monitor her food, she stays in pretty good shape. But there are times when I can't exercise her as much, and then you see the weight creeping up. And selfishly, I know those of you who come to my facility, there's a scale there. I bought it, for everyone to use, because I am passionate about keeping the dogs pretty healthy. So weigh your dog pretty regularly at the facility. It's there. You can come in, weigh your dog as much as you want. So then that way you can keep track of how you're progressing, and if you put them on a diet, or if they're losing weight all of a sudden, that's a big tip off something's wrong too, right?
So my she's gonna be 10 in May. She's at 2 ounces of raw twice a day, and of course she's starving, because I would be too, right? She eats less than my Papillon, who's 7.5 months old, who eats 2.5 ounces. I give him 2.5 ounces. He doesn't eat it all. And he's like, no, I'm good. So and you have to remember they're at different stages of their lives, right? So depending on age, exercise, all that stuff, you can't go according to what it says on the packaging that you feed your dog, because remember, they're in the business of selling food. Let's be honest, right? They're going to want you to overfeed. It's just the way it is, and that's okay. So that's why I think what we look at is more of what the look and feel of the dog, how they look and feel. So,
and luckily now, right? Would you agree, Lisa? And up here, there's more and more vets getting on board saying the dogs are overweight, because early on we used to see some dogs that were pretty overweight, and the vet were telling these people that the dogs are fine.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, where I'm at, it's a little different. I don't see that as much here. I see that more in Illinois than I do in my neck of the woods. So, and I've encountered my fair share of people who have overweight dogs on prongs going over dog walks and stuff like that, which makes me cringe. Yes, I'm not going to lie. And I think it's super important, because like, if I jump off, like when I was younger, I would jump off a roof. It wasn't a problem. But like, if I do that now, my knees are going to break apart. I'm like, it's just, you know what I mean? It's like, that's what happens. I couldn't do that now. I would have to be in bed recovering for, I don't know, a long time. So,
right.
We can't do what we did when we were first younger. And then we go back and we say, well, I did that. That's why I have the issues I have right now. Right.
Right.
And then with the extra weight doesn't help.
Right. And that's true with, especially for dogs like agility. Being slim is really important in that sport. And yes, you can use the sport to help your dog lose weight. However, you wouldn't have all the equipment at full height. You would start very low height to be able to, build up that dog's ability to do the equipment and also to lose more and to help with the weight loss program. It wouldn't be, you wouldn't be moving up in full height equipment with a dog that's still clearly overweight, and people do it all the time.
Yes.
And the thing is, then you have cruciate tears and everything, and it gets really expensive then.
Right.
So it's like, it's one of those things you want to also save your your wallet. So couple of kind of tips. Here comes Joanne. She's back. Hello. So some of the tips for helping your dog lose weight. And also, the first thing is you want to see if your dog is overweight, because that, for some people, it's a very, very different. Like, it's like for some people, it said, "Oh, he's a little chubby," and then you're like, "Oh my, it's a very relative thing, right? Is it chubby or is it really, really overweight?" So, for example, I'm going to show you the body condition score. This is what most of the vets use and go by. And I know it's hard to read because it's small, but, and I'm going to, this is what's going to help you figure out if your dog is ideal weight or a little overweight, right? This is really, and these numbers, we're going to use them later because we're going to do math. Believe it or not. So you want to figure out what condition your dog is in. If they're under the ideal weight, you can see ribs, you can see their hip bones, as you can see on this one, and it's pretty, they're pretty thin. And you want to notice that, like, I don't know if Melanie's on, but one of our instructors, her dog seemed much thinner, right? And it could be because she's been more active and doing some more stuff with him. Then you would have to, definitely want to look at putting, giving him a little bit more food, because you could see his ribs from a distance, right? And that's not typical for that particular dog. So you want to keep an eye on if the dog is underweight and overweight. Both things are not great, right? Because you want to have that, you want to have that muscle tone. So that just like me, like I'm trying to build muscle, because at my age, that's what's going to keep me from falling down and breaking stuff. So so you want to build that muscle, right? So the first one, if you're one, it's almost like you can, ribs, your vertebrae, pelvic bones, and all the bony prominences are evident from a distance. No discernible body fat, and obvious loss of muscle mass. So that you can see at a shelter, dogs that have been stray, stuff like that. And then the number two is, same, easily visible, no fat. Some you can see some of the bony prominences, and not so much muscle loss. And three, go ahead.
I was just gonna say 3 is the second one, right? So the only thing I would say about 3 is, unless you have a sight hound, then they're supposed to look like that.
That's correct. Good point.
Because so many people who own whippets or greyhounds or whatever kind of hound, they're like, I can't believe everybody comes up to me and tells me I'm starving my dog.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you, I did see for the first time ever a fat whippet.
Yep.
I was like, I couldn't tell what breed it was.
And you know what the interesting thing is too, like the dogs that do like the sled dogs and stuff, they want to see so many ribs. Like usually it's a couple of ribs, right? 2 to 3 ribs or whatever for ideal, but then there's like 5 to 6 ribs, depending, 5 ribs, and they almost look like they're starving. And people are like, your dogs are starving. They're like, no, they're fit to do their job.
Right.
So I think that's another point to bring about.
Right. That's true. Because number 3 is definitely the visible with no fat, tops of the lumbar, brains becoming prominent. So that's actually number 3 is what you see the sight hound supposed to look like, right? Yeah. That's, thereabouts. But one of the things with the sight hounds, you do see muscle tone, right? You will see it.
And that's the big difference, right? Muscle tone versus not.
Right.
Like, and muscle tone, think about like, what I think about is like a well-developed, and just using a breed, for example, like very muscular, like pit bulls in the rear I've seen, right, where they have very muscular
Yeah.
end quarters and stuff like that. If a dog shows muscle tone, that is not fat or too thin. That's appropriate for that particular situation
Right.
because they're still thriving, right? And that's, I think, what's important to understand.
Right. And then ideal, you can see the ribs, you can touch the ribs, and you should be able to just pass your hand and be able to feel the ribs with a little bit of fat. You can see a waistline. And that's usually what I usually go for is, can you see a waistline, an abdominal tuck? Because if your dog looks like a little bit of an ottoman, then too much. And then 5, it's another ideal, but you're kind of tipping over. And I think that's where my lab spends most of her time, between 5, 5.5, 6. Every once in a while, she's put on a little bit of weight. So number 5 is the ribs are palatable without excess fat covering, waist observed behind the ribs when viewed from above. So I always watch for the tuck on my lab because there was a time that she got up to 64 pounds, and there was no tuck to be had. And she wants to be a fat lab. That's her goal in life. But unfortunately, we can't have that. All right. And now we're going over, like I said, we've also seen, thin dogs, but the majority of the thing, and we didn't get a chance to ask Joanne, but in your practice, you see a lot more overweight dogs than underweight dogs, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's getting better. It's getting better,
Yeah.
I would say, quite honestly. But and the hardest part is people don't notice, right? People don't, and you have to approach it very delicately. Just like you don't want to go like poking around and got a little bit extra there, But we had this conversation before we went live, sort of about. I don't. A lot of people love their dogs through food. And
yeah, food is love.
I was mentioning too, my dogs usually always get a bite or two of what I'm eating, but right, they don't get half a sandwich. So,
Right.
and I think I heard Lisa mentioning it before it dropped me. Most people I'm feeding exactly what the dog food bag says to feed.
Right.
Which is unfortunately usually at least a third heavy.
Right. Right. And then for over ideal here is ribs are palatable with a slight excess of fat covering. Waistline is discernible, viewed from above, but not prominent. Abdominal tuck is apparent, but that's still a little thick, right? And that's why I say my lab shifts between 5 and 6 on a regular. I have to really keep an eye on it. Except for that one time she got a little bit past that.
And she's how old? And I think age is
she's going to be 6.
Right.
In April.
And so I would say the same thing with my Dutch Shepherd. I was feeding her a little bit more because she looked a little thin. Well, lately she's looking a little more portly. I'm not seeing as many ribs. And I'm like, we need to adjust that. So I adjust down her food. And of course, she's like, I'm starving or killing me, whatever. But I'm like, no, you're fine. You'll be okay. I wish somebody was as adamant about my own feeding as I am about yours.
Yeah.
Because I would be a lot healthier, right?
Right.
But I've noticed she doesn't have as many ribs. And before people are like, she's really thin, and she'd have 3 or 4 ribs showing, right, from the side view, a nice tuck up, blah, 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 whatever. And then a nice little from the top view. And I'm like, so I adjusted her food. She's still portly, but we haven't been getting as much exercise
yeah.
weather, right? So that does make a difference because when I do exercise her more, granted she's 5, and my exercise regime is different from a younger dog versus an older dog, right? We expend so much more calories when we're younger versus when we're older because we're more stagnant in our life, right? So that becomes more of an issue as well.
Right. All right. 7, ribs palatable with difficulty, heavy fat cover, noticeable fat deposits over lumbar area and base of tail, waist absent or barely visible. Even though abdominal tuck may be present, right? So that's what I mean. Every once in a while, she'll tip on that, 6, 7-ish, right?
Yep. The only thing I will throw in there is to me personally, puppies under 4 months, under 3 months should pretty much look like sevens.
That's right. Agreed. 100%.
Right. So you have to be careful where and what you're looking at, right? Don't
Right.
make your puppy a 5.
Yeah. Because your puppy should be eating a lot more food, and they're because they're using that food to grow. So we're not talking about puppies. We're talking about adult dogs here. Puppies are the exception because they are going to need more food because they're developing and growing. So they're going to eat a fair amount of food.
So what do you guys think about like feeding puppies puppy food for a certain period of time?
I'll be honest, I never do. I
Yeah.
only feed I feed regular I feed raw and I feed regular dog food because some of the puppy foods they grow a little faster and they get pano and all that stuff. So I don't particularly use puppy food. So I just don't.
Yeah. When I did, I too feed raw. Hey, shh. I too feed raw, but when I did feed puppy food, right about 4 months is when I'm transferring them to adult food.
Yeah.
So right for about 2 months, when you bring them home at 8 weeks to 16 weeks, I mean, I think puppy food is fine, especially if you have a nice high quality kibble.
Right.
But otherwise, I'm with you. The same thing, right? They potential to grow too fast, too many calories as they're shifting, all of those things.
Right. And I usually start them on raw. So now because my almost 6-month-old puppy is eating exactly what my 100-pound shepherd eats.
Yep.
Right.
And
So-
I think the other thing too is so like my Papillon, who's 7.5 months old, he's more thinner, but I could feel a little more fat around the ribs. So I'm happy with that. When I first got him, he had Giardia, and that affected like his food intake. And then of course, if you add medicine to it, he was refusing eating his food, which concerned me, of course, because I added a medicine to it. And so those are other considerations too. And so honestly, my concern right now is gut health for him because I'm worried about what that's going to do in terms of his growth. I think he's a little more underdeveloped than I would like. And that's par for course. Like that happens when you get a dog, right? It's like luck of the draw. Oh, you're exposed to this, you're exposed to that.
Oh,
And
sure.
so it took us a few rounds to like get to where we needed to be, where everything was clear, that his gut was utilizing the stuff he had. And so then part of me wondered, should I have started him on puppy food? And you know what the thing is like, we don't know for sure 100% unless you're constantly testing the gut, unless you're constantly like monitoring everything. And let's be honest, average people aren't doing that. Like we are not saying, oh my gosh, that's interesting. I would always check them because I'm a little bit of a fiend about certain things about health for my dogs because I want longevity, right? And to me, that's most important.
Yeah, me too.
Me, not so much. My personal, not so much, but my dogs are more important. So
I do. I'm a little bit nuts. Well, my vet knows I'm crazy. Anyway,
I was
And
going
then-
to say too, when you start talking about longevity, that's the only thing. I don't know. I think a lot of people may not agree with me, but I'm going to say it because I do sort of think it's true. When your dogs become a little more geriatric, right? I'm not talking 10. I'm talking right where they tend to get old person bones. They get that they lose a lot of muscle mass. I might bump my dog up to a 6 from a 5, right?
Mhm, I would
And
agree.
the reason is you have to be very, very careful because most seniors become a little arthritic or you have a little trouble moving around. So you got to be real careful to not go too far. But, those of us with seniors, I mean, if something happens to them, they can go downhill very quickly. And
yes.
I like just that little bit of extra help.
Yep.
If they're going to spend a couple days not eating, then they don't look like a skeleton. So
Yeah.
that's just my
And that's something else to think about, right? So for those of us who have had seniors, like I had Lucas, he had a really bad bout of pancreatitis. And so that depleted a lot of him. And so for me, I was trying to like feed him, but because he wasn't feeling great, he didn't want to eat as much. So then I was hoping that whatever I had in him, but it depleted a lot of him. And then he felt skin and bones for me. And it freaked me out because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want you to go before I'm ready. Not that I'd ever be ready. And
Yeah, I
never
was gonna say.
happened, never was, right? and still miss that dog like crazy. But, you know, we just want to try to err on what is best for our dogs and gives them the best part of who they are and what they can, you know, who they are. Like, it's important, right? So like for him, when he would go through a bout of pancreatitis, it affected his appetite. So then he wouldn't eat as much. And then I had to work to get all the food back into him. And then, you know, and then it was like almost empty calories, if that makes sense, because then you're just trying to throw anything at him to like put some weight on.
Yeah.
And then he got like not a lot of muscle mass. So that become another issue down the road too. So I think the stages of life are really relative to your body condition score.
Right.
Right.
And so just like as we talked about before, when Cha-Cha got older, I did a lot of underwater tread to build her muscle because as she got older, I wanted her to have good muscle mass. And she did to the day she died. She never got very frail. And again, I did it for her just to build muscle and all that and to keep her as mobile as possible as she got older. You know, even though, you know, just like when we get older, we don't eat as much. Same with the dogs, right? They don't like to eat as much, even though Cha-Cha was a pretty good eater all the way to the end. All right. Number 8 this is when you're really getting up there, right? Ribs are under very heavy fat cover, or you can't palpitate, you know, you got to really work to find those ribs. And then you have fat deposits over your back and the base of the tail. You have no waist and no abdominal tuck, and obvious abdominal distortion may be present, meaning, see, like this dog right up here looks, you know, on the 9 looks pretty, you know, really fat from the top. Looks like we call it the ottoman. And then 9 is just massive, just really, really obese and overweight dogs. So you want to really, and this is available on the internet. You know, it's not like I think one of the things you want to, you know, really keep an eye on it all the time. It really, really helps. Yeah. And so and I know it's hard your Patty, your vet wants to change your dog from 4 cups to 2. Yeah. So we're gonna talk a little bit about actually about how to help them lose weight, because we do have ultimate control over their food, but we also don't want to have a situation where the dog is, you know, very hungry and all that stuff, and then you have a, you know, an emotional situation, and also where the dog's hungry, then they can get into other problems too, right? So you can get some issues going on. And I'm gonna actually this was such a funny video. I've got to show it to you because it was
So moving into that topic while you're pulling that up, I just have a question. If Patty's willing to share, because her original comment was, my dog put on 8 pounds since November. So I don't know if you guys know Patty.
yes, I do.
Okay, so I would want to know, what breed do you have, and also what do you think put on 8 pounds? Like, if you could leave it in the comments, and if you don't want to share, that's okay, Patty. I just think it's, you know, I think it would be a good comment to share with others. So go ahead.
Okay, can you see the video?
Yep.
So this Frenchie's on a diet.
No, you've had enough.
I think I saw this.
Move on.
Yeah.
Move on.
Move on.
No, you'll get more tonight at supper. You are not starving. No, you're not. You're on a diet.
So you don't want this.
No more breakfast. Listen, Cashew, you're on a diet because you're a little chubby, okay?
What?
Yeah. No.
You're chubby.
Do you want a snack? Like, maybe an ice cube?
An ice cube? Yeah, okay. Right.
She's like, are you nuts? Anyway, yeah, she's a shepherd. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Blue
I
Stool-
mean,
oh,
8
okay.
pounds in a shepherd versus 8 pounds in a pug. It
Right.
matters. So that's why I was curious.
Yeah. So first thing, so one of the things we're going to talk a little bit is how to help your stay healthy. And you know what? We're not going to discuss like raw fed, home cooked meal, kibble. You know, it's like, and yes, Carol, older dogs do need more protein. Absolutely. As they get older to help maintain some of that muscle mass. So absolutely correct. But the reason, you know, we're not going to dispute what food you feed. I just want to be thoughtful about it. I raw feed, but I also give my dogs kibble from time to time because in case I have to travel or whatever. But I monitor it. So, and we're going to actually talk about that a little bit. So the first thing is know your dog's healthy weight. You should know how much your dog should weigh because otherwise it's really not. If you don't know what to shoot for or what the goal is, then why would you, you know, how do you know where to point and shoot, right? You don't know. So one of there's a calculator in, and I'm going to share the screen to help you decide how to figure out what your dog's weight should be. And again, you can differ, but it's, you know, and you can maybe like in Joanne's case, like you can point for a little bit higher, and that's totally fine, right? Because you're going to do what's going to fit for your dog. So this is kind of how to calculate. You have to do math, which I don't like, but so the BCS is that body score thing that we looked at. So you have to assess your dog based on that chart and then use that number where you think your dog is, right? So in this case, there's a 50-pound dog with the body condition score of 9. So that means it's very, very heavy, right? And then here you are going to, this is the math you have to do. And this is available. I'll put it on the comments so you guys can have it. And this kind of tells you, so it tells you how to calculate it. And currently the dog weighs 50 pounds with a BCS of 9, and the dog should be weighing 35 pounds, right?
Jeez,
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, but think about it. You have a dog that's a 9.
Right.
That's a lot overweight, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you're talking, so that's a big weight drop. I calculated this for Jive. And technically she's weighs 60 pounds, and per this thing she should weigh 55.
Yeah.
Which I didn't tell her, so because she would lose her mind. But so this is kind of, you know, something that you want to think about when you start, you know, so that you know what you're shooting for if your dog's a little overweight or where to stay in the neighborhood. I'll be honest, I'm not tied to, oh, it's got to weigh this much weight, but I usually try to be like, if they say 55, you know, I might kind of go back and forth, you know, a couple pounds back, you know, back and forth. So I'm not that diligent about it. That has to be absolutely perfect, right? And yeah, and then you have to exercise. So that's the first one. I'm going to actually paste that calculator so you guys have it. Because I think that's important. You have to know what you're working towards, right? And then here we talk about keeping your dog active, right? And so for me, I know when I swim Jive on a regular basis and watch what she eats, or you know, I watch what she eats all the time, but just adding swimming to her life helps her keep her pretty trim. So now I am like, now in the winter, I take her swimming at least every, you know, once a week, sometimes more, but I don't usually get to. Usually it's once a week, plus trying to keep her active doing other things, right? She gets to run around a little bit, give her some exercise. So keep your dogs active. Having said that, if your dog has a body condition score of 9, be real careful what activity you do. Right. So if you have a very overweight dog, you want to keep the dog, you want to do underwater tread, builds muscle and reduces fat. It's wonderful. If you can't do that, you want to do some lower impact, slow walk, long walks or stuff like that, which might help keep your dog. Don't be running around trying to, do what
Miles.
take your dog running, right? Because
Right.
a dog that's that overweight, you're not,
What I think another important point to make is that there's a difference with the percussion on the type of surface you run them on, right? So if I'm going to run them on like something, I'm going to choose grass or something that's a little more spongy for the dog's, knees and stuff like that, joints, because that's important, because that will affect, if your dog is heavy, that will affect them long term moving forward in terms of arthritis and stuff like that. And the other thing too is, remember, going for walks is different. Our dog's pace is way different than ours. Like, they are much faster in terms of stretching out than we are. So our pace basically slows them down and then inhibits the way that they move. So that's why a big thing is putting them on a long line or taking them places where they can stretch out and kind of move around freely without a leash, provided it's safe.
Right. All right. So that's one. Keep your dog active, because that's important.
One of the other things that I would add too is, even for super overweight dogs, if your dog's a ball dog, play ball, play fetch, right? Outside in the yard, even if it's in your house, try not to do too much repetitive stuff, but just getting the dog off the couch and moving.
Right. Helpful. Right. The other thing is distinguish between begging and hunger. I cannot tell you how many people, I have a beagle too, and 2 labs. You would think they're completely starved all the time. So, you know what I mean? Like, I know, because that's why some people, well, he's hungry. No, he's not. Because I could feed my lab and all my dogs, and if I would be eating a pizza, they'd be right there begging, and they just finished their food. So that's not hunger, that's begging. Now, if it gets closer to feeding time, where they might be it's a very different tempo for the dog, right? They're like, it's not just, let's see if I can get it. It's a much different tempo between begging and hunger. And when the dog begs, it's like, believe me, dogs are going to do what works. And if begging is looking at you and giving them the sad eyes, gets them a cookie, why wouldn't they do it, whether they're hungry or not? Right?
Yes. And my little Ottoman dog, who's almost 10 years old, will sit there and cookies are there and she'll drool. And it's not as if she's starving. She's like, I'm just starving, right? People pay attention to me and feed me. Oh, she's hungry. No, stop. Right. It's like, and then my husband will sit there and eat, and she's like, oh, she's sitting there and drooling all over me. Well, I get up and move. I don't know what to tell you. She's learning how to do, so, and those are things too, what's being said is that, yes, there is a difference. My dogs know when it's time for feeding, because they start screaming. They're like, we're starving. We're going to die. Hurry up and feed us. I'm like, absolutely not. You're going to die. Not going to die. You're just anticipating. And then of course I feed into it because I want them to shut up. So hurry up, feed them, shut up. Okay, we're done. That's what their behavior prompted my behavior. So I start putting their meals together in the morning, so I don't have to hear as minimal screaming as possible, right? So, and that's something to keep in mind. You're like, I gotta hurry up and feed them so they shut up, and then they shut up for a little bit, and then of course, whatever. But
yeah, you want to distinguish between begging and hunger, because I think 9 times out of 10, right, like Joanne said, it's begging, not really hungry, unless it's, like I said, sometimes you see that behavior closer to feeding time, right? And then limit treats and table scraps, which, like Joanne said, she gives them a little piece, not a whole half a sandwich from her thing. And limit treats. And this goes back to, depending on what we're doing with our dogs, those of us who train our dogs on a regular, you're going to give them a lot more treats than normal people do. But like Lisa alluded to earlier about cute treats, they just don't get cookies to be adorable and cute. Oh, look how cute they are, and get a cookie for that. They should actually work for their food, for their treats. And then, like I tell everyone, adjust your dinner. If you had a long training session, or you had a seminar all day where the dog was getting treats all day, you are going to have to adjust that dinner or that breakfast. You're not going to feed them as much because they've been getting treats all day long. right? So you want to adjust that so it's not adding all those extra calories. And so, and like if there's a seminar coming up, I know, or if I have, a couple classes, then I adjust their dinner. They don't eat as much.
The other thing I would say is like, I don't think there's anything wrong with like table scraps.
Mhm.
Like I'll put it aside, right, for trading purposes. And I think, of course, you have to, moderation is best for everybody. But like if I'm working on a really hard or difficult question or trying to prove a behavior for my dog, I'm going to put aside those scraps and utilize them, but still adjust their meals, right? So it's not as if you can't ever give that to them. You just need to make sure that you're balancing appropriately.
Right. Absolutely. Because you could use, that's why I tell people use that. And that's why, and I don't know if you guys agree, I probably prefer to use like meat or cooked chicken than store-bought treats, because they have a lot more preservatives, and the cooking a breast of chicken it has nothing in it, right? Or doesn't have as much in it, right? As much preservatives and other extra calories.
Well,
That's
fresh
right.
is best always, right?
Yeah. I don't always do that because I can't, but I get
You said French is best. I was like, is that mustard?
Not French, fresh.
Sorry, it's been a long day.
and here's the next one. Joanne talked about this earlier. Measure and monitor. Measure your dog's food. I had a client come in, lovely people. The dog was extremely overweight. And it's like, we just feel the bowl all the time. So it's like, so I go, no, you have to monitor how much you put in there. You have to measure their food intake. And because you know what, the other reason you want to know, well, in the house I live in, again, I got 2 labs and a beagle. Ain't gonna happen. Somebody's gonna get really fat. I'm gonna guess it's my female lab. but you have to. We have a scale and we have a scoop and we measure their food all the time, right? And that's what they get. That's it, right? It's really important. I don't know because it's like it's for us. Like, if the package says you can have 100 calories is 4 chips. How many of us take those, measure those out, and put
4
them
chips, that's all you get. I'll be like, shoot, I'll work that off. I'll take the extra 4. That's the issue.
So you really want to be mindful of that, as measure and monitor. Same with the treats. Take what you need, and then just be aware how much you've given your dog so you can adjust that meal.
Right, and that's sort of why I was asking Patty before, right? Why does your dog gain? So if you are a measurer, right? Like I haven't changed anything. My dogs gets 1 cup in the morning and 1 cup at night, or they get 8 ounces of this or whatever, right? And your dog puts on 3 pounds a month. The vet is going to ask you, how much are you feeding? How much are you really feeding? What all are they getting? Is somebody feeding them treats or snacks or table scraps or whatever? And if not, right, you can have a pretty serious medical issue. Same goes with losing weight, right? Is even worse. But
she said she was giving her 4 cups, and her vet said to give her 2. So she was getting twice.
And that's a drastic change too, right? So you got to ease it down.
Yeah,
so those are other things to consider as well.
Yeah, and actually, I was gonna cover that. Yeah, because don't just customize your dog's diet, right? So I have many dogs, as you know, so do all of us, right? We have a lot of dogs. So, and one thing I noticed, I wanted to incorporate a different protein. I wanted to incorporate fish because that's leaner for my lab. I noticed she didn't have a lot of gusto eating that fish yesterday. I'm like, no, she don't like it so much. And she had a little bit of a irpy stomach today. So I'm like, okay, so fish doesn't agree with her. But adjust, and then the boys and the other dogs ate it fine and had no issue with it. But she, for some reason, doesn't really care for that. So she didn't eat very much of it. And I try to keep her mostly on chicken and fowl. so that it's leaner, and then the shepherd and the puppy get more beef, because it has a little bit more fat in it. Even though my shepherd, I gotta, his weight is good, but he probably can lose a pound or two. Um,
Deborah Evans had mentioned about vegetables. I think there's something else to mention about vegetables. Like you have to be careful the kinds of vegetables, right? So there's some that have more carbohydrates and are
Right.
higher in that. So like carrots, for example, people are like, oh, my dog loves carrots. Well, that's great. But it's not necessarily, it's counterintuitive to, oh, it's still a vegetable, but it could be more providing more caloric intake to the dog, plus sugar and stuff like that. So I think you also want to pay attention to that. In addition to, if I'm going to use, like some people say, green beans. Well, if you give them plain fresh green beans without being like breaking down the cell barrier by like cooking them a little bit, then that's going to be an issue as well too. So,
and this is what it goes back to. Don't go cold turkey. You're going to reduce their food slowly. So you're not going to take that dog that was eating 4 cups and just down it to 2. You're going to do maybe one meal. She gets a cup and a half with some pumpkin or fiber in there. And then you can do the other meal with some, pumpkin or green beans in there, so that they have a little, they get a little more fullness. I use pumpkin a lot when I need to help them, especially the lab. She eats pumpkin just fine. The other thing you want to add fiber. You can have some apple in there, canned pumpkin, which is the one I use the most, and
Potato.
sweet potato. Again, they have a little more carbs, so you want to be mindful and you want to maybe add those high carb foods, a bit as they've lost weight, right, on the way. And so slowly cut it back. Don't go from 2 cups to 4 cups in one day. Reduce it down 75%, take it down a little bit, so until you're at the number that you want, right? So,
Well, I was going to say the other thing that I would offer you too, if you want to cut it a little quicker, if you have the means, is feed 3 times a day or even 4 times a day, right? So if you really, really had a medical need to cut them from 4 to 2, right? I might feed them 4 times a day and they get a half a cup apiece. So at least they're getting constant food until they get used to, then you could do 3 times a day, then down to 2 times a day type of thing too. That should help at least get something in their stomach.
yeah. And she might, and psychologically she'll be like, oh, I'm eating more now.
right.
Yeah, right.
And what I do, so she's on raw. So I went from 2.5 ounces, like for IV, she went 2.5 ounces twice a day to 2 ounces. The vet said cut her back and then add more. So there's a product that I utilize called Green Juju Bailey's Blend, and it's more cruciferous types of vegetables that can help her be a little more full. Now she's a little more tooty, but we're gonna take that over, over chunky.
Yeah, right. And then you got to stick with it, because like anything for us too, right? You have to keep going and keep adding that, and don't worry if the weight's not coming off right away, just like you would for yourself, right? And so as long as they like veggies, that they'll give them that full feeling, that's really helpful. And that's one way to cut back if they'll eat it. So like my labs are very good. They like all kinds of vegetables. They eat everything. So it's not really a problem. My shepherd won't do it. It's like, unless the vegetables have been touching meat, he's not really interested. He will eat green beans, but it's not his all-time favorite, right? So it's one of those things. So the reason we wanted to do it is because we always focus on the dog's training and mental stimulation, the physical dog. And as you know, we care about it a lot. We talk about it a lot, but this is where it gets very delicate, right? Because people don't like to be told that their dog is fat. And it's like, we don't ever say, hey, your dog is fat. It's
Right.
like, oh, we usually try to be very sweet and gentle about it. But the truth is, we are still telling you your dog is fat, if it is, because it's like it's one of those things that's going to shorten their life. It's also going to cost you more money in the long run when you have to take them to the vet all the time when they're sick and they have all kinds of health problems. So, because it's true of people too. The better you take care of yourself, the more you eat well and exercise and all that, the less the healthier you are, and you don't have to be at the doctor so much. Yeah, and then a lot of blueberries, raspberries are great too because they're great antioxidants. So if your dog will eat those, that's really helpful too. So adding, some of those things or try to introduce those type of foods and see if they're interested in eating those. But you want to always keep an eye on your dog's weight because even, like I have, and some dogs, just like some people, are going to have a tendency to want to stay overweight and put weight on very quickly. And some dogs, there's some dogs you can't keep any weight on, right?
And that's the other thing I think too. It's like it's not just lean and it's fit and lean, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like when you think about the quality of the exercise you give, so I know like fitness is a big thing. And I think a lot of times we end up we don't care about the dog's weight and we're like, oh, we're just going to exercise them. But you don't realize the impact of it. Like taking a heavy dog and having them do jumps, there's more percussion on when the dog jumps and so forth. So you're damaging more joints. And I think, I don't know, Joanne, do you do any kind of fitness classes or anything like that? Or I think the fitness classes, I have to tell you, they're so underrated. Yep. They're not as fun for people because precision is important. It's like when you start to exercise, form is important, right? Mm-hmm. And I really have to plug that because to me, I would rather have a lean and fit dog before I ever do any kind of agility or any of that, because it is so important to longevity for the dog to stay in the sport. Right? Yeah. Because they can have so many injuries. It's already a high injury prone type because of the repetition and the things we do. I think it is so underrated. And if the vets that I've talked to, like rehab vets and so forth, they're like, nobody does the exercises. It is so important. Right. And to me, that is like, I would spend more time. I have one of the ladies who works with me. She does tons of fitness stuff and she works a lot, and it doesn't have to be super strenuous, right? It has to be just proper form. A square stand, for example, just doing a square stand builds core muscle, and having that. And Tracy, I know we had Tracy on before, and she can speak more to some of those exercises and fitness exercises that kind of isolate those important things before you start getting to the sexy stuff. But everybody wants to do the sexy stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that foundation is critical. Everything foundation is the most important before you start getting into all the nitty gritty and the sexy looking things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, if you think about it too, right? Like, let's just look at in terms of super athlete humans, right? And this is where I love referring back to those sight hounds, right? They're long and lanky and really ribby. And if you think about what a marathon runner or anybody who does real long distance running, or even some sprinters, right? But the long distance runners, they don't have a ton of muscle tone, right? I mean, when you look at them, they don't look buff. They don't look ripped, right? Because they're using all of that stuff versus when you look at a swimmer, just because everybody knows Michael Phelps, right? From back in the day. I mean, even that guy you could see every ripple in every single muscle because he used every ounce of his body for his sport, right? Yeah. So when you're looking at a lure coursing dog, a true lure coursing dog or a dog that's out like hunting long distance sight hound stuff versus a dog doing agility versus, a dog who maybe is a guardian dog, which isn't going to be out there running, but they're big, they're bulky, and they're powerful to put a lot of, bulk where their mouth is. They're built differently to do different jobs. And I don't see it as much anymore, but I will tell you about 8 to 10 years ago, I started seeing a lot of agility dogs start looking like sight hounds.
Yeah, they were really thin.
Really thin, really ribby, and you saw a lot of muscle loss with it.
Yep.
right? And so when you think about the strength that it takes to run and turn at speed and launch yourself and hold your shoulders while you're going over equipment and landings, those are the dogs that should look like Michael Phelps. You know what I mean?
So, and it's like you said, it's a difference between a long distance runner and a sprinter.
Yep.
Their body types are way different, or a gymnast versus a sprinter.
Football player.
Right? Yeah.
So like these are my friends, Hannah Pemberton's Pharaoh Hounds, and they are Pharaoh Hounds. They do lure coursing. They run a ton, and you can use, and they don't look overly thin. But they're very slim build, and you can see some of the ribs, but they're perfectly. I mean, that's what they're supposed to look like, right? My Georgia contingent. They almost all of them have sight hounds, so I get to see those breeds all the time, and it's pretty interesting. So people see them, and that's what they're supposed to look like, and they still have muscle tone. They look very healthy. So yeah, it really does depend on what your dog, the job, right? And that's why I'll be honest, I am not a fan. Like, my shepherd is too big to do agility. While his heart is willing, I'm just not really crazy about asking him. That repetitive jumping and all that would probably take a toll and probably not be great for him. So even though he's a little leaner, he's still a heavy dog.
And think about the bone, right? The amount of bone when you're doing certain things, right? And
Right.
so that makes a difference too, because the mass and so forth, the percussion of it is a big deal. So the thicker bone dogs have a harder time. They're not fast like border collies, who have a shorter, much more thinner bone, depending on whether or not you get working lines or conformation lines too. So those are things to consider.
Right. So so one of the things we wanted to kind of, bring to you today is just to really look at your dog, make sure they're in the best condition that you can have them in. And I understand some dogs have thyroid issues, and I think that's what Joanne was going to, Patty, about a dog gaining 8 pounds. You want to make sure that the thyroid's okay before you, if let's say you've cut their food back a little and you've increased their exercise and it's been a long time and they haven't lost weight, you would definitely want to make sure you check that out, right? And make sure that that's not a problem and that's not what's causing some of the issue, right? Because dogs have thyroid issues just like people do. So anyway, so just wanted to keep, because the big reason to keep them, in good shape, just like us, right, is to live longer. They already don't live very long to begin with. So, having a very overweight dog keeps their health, their longevity cuts it down. So, I said, like Lisa said, if somebody could feed me and exercise me, I probably could live a much longer life.
And I'd be thinner.
Yeah.
And I could bend down and pick things up without being, right?
Yeah, right. So you definitely want to give that gift to your dog, because we can control the exercise, how much food and all those things, so that they can be with us a little bit longer, right? Another couple extra months, another few years, I'll take it. Even if it means that sometimes you're not going to get the food you want. So anyway, thank you for tuning in tonight, and take care and good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.